2 Chronicles 30. Then Hezekiah sent word throughout all Israel and Judah, and he also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh to come to the Lord's temple in Jerusalem to observe the Passover of the Lord, the God of Israel, for the king and his officials and the entire congregation in Jerusalem decided to observe the Passover of the Lord in the 2nd month, because they were not able to observe it at the approximate time. Not enough of the priests had conversated themselves, and the people hadn't been gathered together in Jerusalem. The proposal pleased the king and the congregation, so they affirmed the proposal and spread the message throughout all Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, to come to observe the Passover of the Lord, the God of Israel, in Jerusalem. For they haven't observed it often, as prescribed. So the couriers went throughout Israel. And Judah with letters from the hand of the king and his officials, and according to the king's command, saying, Israel, its return to the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, so that he may return to those of you who remain, who have escaped the grasp of the kings of Assyria. Don't be like your ancestors and your brothers, who were unfaithful to the Lord, the God of their ancestors, so that he made them an object of horror, as you yourself sees. Don't become obstinate now like your ancestors did. Give your allegiance to the Lord, and come to his sanctuary that he has conservated forever. Serve the Lord your God, so that he may turn his burning anger away from you. For when you return to the Lord, your brothers and your sons will receive mercy in the presence of their captors, and will return to this land. For the Lord your God is gracious and merciful. He will not turn his face away from you if you return to him. The couriers traveled from city to city in the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, as far as Zebulun, but the inhabitants laughed at them and mocked them. But some from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. Also, the power of God was at work in Judah to unite them, to carry out his officials by the word of the Lord. A very large assembly of people were gathered in Jerusalem to observe the festival of Unleavened bread in the second month. They proceeded to take away the altars that were in Jerusalem, and they took away the incense altars and threw them into the Kidron Valley. They slaughtered the Passover lamb on the 14th day of the second month. The priests and Levites were ashamed, and they consecrated themselves and brought burnt offerings to the Lord's temple. They stood at their prescribed spots according to the law of Moses, the man of God. The priests slaughtered the blood received from the Levites, for there were many in the assembly who had not consecrated themselves, and so that the Levites were in charge of slaughtering the Passover lamb for every unclean person to consecrate the lamb to the Lord. A large number of people, many from Ephraim, Manasseh, Asher, and Zebulun, were ritually unclean, yet they had eaten Passover contrary to what was written. But Hezekiah had interested for them, saying, "May the good Lord provide anointment on behalf of whoever sets his whole heart on seeking God, the Lord, the God of his ancestors, even though not according to the perfection rules of the sanctuary." So the Lord heard Zechariah and healed the people. The Israelites who were present in Jerusalem observed the festival of unleavened bread 7 days with great joy, and the Levites and priests praised the Lord day after day with loud instruments. Then Hezekiah encountered all the Levites who performed skillfully before the Lord. They ate at the appointed festival for 7 days, sacrificing fellowship offerings and giving thanks to the Lord, the God of their ancestors. The whole conversation decided to observe 7 more days, so they observed 7 days with joy. For King Hezekiah of Judah contributed 1,000 bulls and 7,000 sheep for the congregation. Also, the officials contributed 1,000 bulls and 10,000 sheep for the congregation, and many priests conserved themselves. Then the whole assembly of Judah with the priests and Levi, the whole assembly that came from Israel, the resident aliens who came from the land of Israel, and those who were living in Judah rejoiced. There was great rejoicing in Jerusalem, for nothing like that like this was known since the days of Solomon, son of David, the king of Israel. Then the priests and the Levites stood in to bless the people. God heard them, and their prayers came into his holy dwelling place in heaven.
2 Chronicles 31. When all this was completed, all Israel who had attempted went out to the city of Judah and broke up the sacred pillars, chopped down the Asherah poles, and tore down the high places and altar throughout Judah and Benjamin, as well as Ephraim and Manasseh, to the last one. Then all the Israelites returned to their cities, each to his own possessions. Hezekiah reestablished division in the priests and Levites for the burnt offerings and fellowship offerings, for ministry, for giving thanks, and for praise in the gates of the camp of the Lord, each division corresponding to his service among the priests and Levites. The king contributed from his own possessions for the regular morning and evening burnt offerings, the burnt offerings of the Sabbaths, of the new moons, and of the appointed feasts, as written in the law of the Lord. He told the people who lived in Jerusalem to give a contribution to the priests and Levites so that they could devote their energy to the law of the Lord. When the word spread, the Israelites gave liberally of the best of the grain, new wine, fresh oil, honey, and all the produce of the field, and they brought in an abundance of tenth of everything. As for the Israelites and Judahites who lived in the city of Judah, they also brought a tenth of the herds and flocks, and a tenth of the dedicated things that they consecrated to the Lord their God. They gathered them into large piles. In the 3rd month, they began building up the piles, and they finished in the 7th month. When Hezekiah and his officials came and viewed the piles, they blessed the Lord and his people Israel. Hezekiah asked the priests and Levites about the piles. The chief priest, Azariah, the household of Zadok, answered him, "Since they began bringing the offering to the Lord's temple, we have been eating and sacrificing and are satisfied, and there is plenty left over because the Lord has blessed his people. This abundance is what is left over." Hezekiah told them to prepare chambers to the Lord's temple, and they prepared them. The offering, the tenth, and the dedicated things were brought faithfully. Conaniah, the Levite, was the officer in charge of them, and his brother Shemaiah was second, Jehiel, Azaziah, Nahath, Azahel, Jerimoth, Jozabad, Eliel, Ismachiah, Mahath, and Benaiah were deputies under the authority of Conaniah and his brother Shemaiah by appointed the chief official of God's temple. Kori, son of Imnah, the Levite, the keeper of the east gate, was over the free will offering to God, to distribute the contribution to the Lord and the consecrated things. Eden, Miniamin, Joshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah. And the cities of the priests were to distribute it faithfully under his authority to their brothers by diversion, whether large or small. In addition, they distribute in the males registered by genealogy 3 years old and above, to all who would enter the Lord's temple for their daily duty, for their service and their responsibility according to their divisions. They distributed also to those recorded by genealogy of the priest by their ancestral families, and the Levites' ancestral families, and the Levites 20 years old and above, by their responsibilities and their definitions, to those registered by genealogy, with all their dependents, wives, sons, and daughters of the whole assembly, for they had faithfully consecrated themselves as holy. And the descendants of Aaron, the priest, in the common field of their cities. In each of every city there were men who were registered by name to distribute portion to every male among the priests, and to every Levite according to the genealogy. Hezekiah did this throughout all Judah. He did what was good and upright and true before the Lord his God. He was diligent. He was diligent in every deed that he began in the service of God's temple, in the instruction of and the commands, in order to seek his God, and his prospered.
2 Chronicles 32. After Hezekiah's faithful deeds, King Sennacherib of Assyria came and entered Judah. He laid siege to the fortified city and intended to break into them. Ezekiel saw that Sennacherib had come and that he planned war on Jerusalem. So he consulted with his officials and his warriors about stopping up the water of the springs that were outside the city. And they helped him. Many people gathered and stopped up all the springs and the stream that flowed through the land. They said, "Why should the kings of Assyria come and find abundant waters?" Then Ezekiel strengthened his position by rebuilding the entire broken down wall and heightened the towers and the other outside wall. He repaired the supporting terraces of the city of David, and made an abundance of weapons and shields. She set military commanders over the people and gathered the people in the square of the city gates. Then he encouraged them, saying, "Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid or discouraged before the king of Assyria, or before the large army that is with him, for there are more with us than with him." He was only human. He has only human strength, but we have the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. So the people relied on the word of the king Ezekiel of Judah. After this, while King Sennacherib of Assyria, with all his armed forces, besieged Lachish, he sent his servants to Jerusalem against King Ezekiel of Judah, and against all those of Judah who were in Jerusalem, saying, "This is what King Sennacherib of Assyria said. What are you relying on that you remain in Jerusalem under siege? Isn't Ezekiel misleading you to give you over to death and famine and thirst when he says, 'The Lord our God will keep us from the grasp of the king of Assyria'? Didn't Ezekiel himself remove his high places and his altars, and said to Judah and Jerusalem, 'You must worship before one altar, and you must burn incense on it'? Don't you know what I and my predecessors have done to all the peoples of the lands? Have any of the national gods of the lands been able to rescue their land from my power? Who among all the gods of these nations that my predecessors completely destroyed was able to rescue his people from my power? That your God should be able to deliver you from my power? So now don't let Ezekiel deceive you, and don't let him mislead you like this. Don't believe him, for no God of any nation or kingdom have been able to rescue his people from my power, or the power of my predecessors. How much less will your God rescue you from my power?" His servants said more against the Lord God and against his servant Ezekiel. He also wrote letters to mock the Lord, the God of Israel, saying against him, "Just like the national gods of the lands that did not rescue their people from my power, so Ezekiel's God will not rescue his people from my power." Then they called out loudly in Hebrew to the people in Jerusalem who were on the wall, to frighten and discourage them in order that he might capture the city. They spoke against the God of Jerusalem like they had spoken against the gods of the people of the earth, which were made by human hands. King Ezekiel and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, prayed about this and cried out to heaven, and the Lord sent an angel who inhabited every valiant warrior leader and commander in the camp of the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria returned in disgrace to his land. he went to the temple of his God, and there some of his own children struck him down with the sword. So the Lord saved Ezekiel and the inhabitants of Jerusalem from the power of King Sennacherib of Assyria, and from the power of all others. He gave them rest on every side. Many were bringing an offering to the Lord to Jerusalem and valuable gifts to the king Ezekiel of Judah, and he was exalted in the eyes of all the nations after that. In those days, Ezekiel became sick to the point of death. So he prayed to the Lord, who spoke to him and gave him a miraculous sign. However, because his heart was proud, Ezekiel didn't respond according to the benefit that had come to him. So there was wrath on him, Judah and Jerusalem. Then Ezekiel humbled himself for the pride of his heart, he and his inhabitants of Jerusalem, so the Lord's wrath didn't come to them during Ezekiel's lifetime. Ezekiel had abundant riches and glory, and he made himself treasuries for silver, gold, and precious stones, spices, shields, and every desirable item. He made warehouses for the harvest of grain, new wine, and fresh oil, and stalls for all kinds of cattle, and pens for flock. He made cities for himself, and he acquired vast numbers of flocks and herds, for God gave him abundant possessions. This same Ezekiel blocked the upper outer of the water from the Gihon springs and channeled it smoothly downward and westward of the city of David. Ezekiel succeeded in everything he did. When the ambassadors of Babylon's rulers were sent to him to inquire about the miraculous sign that happened in the land, God left him to rest him and discover what was in his heart. As for the rest of the events of Ezekiel's reign and his deeds of faithful love, note that they are written in the visions of the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, and in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. Ezekiel rested with his ancestors and was buried on the ascent to the tombs of David's descendant. All Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem paid his honor at his death. His son Manasseh became king in his place.